Hello all, a Knife Tale here, bringing you another knife review, and today we're going to be looking at this Petrified fish. The last few knife reviews I've recorded have been a little bit more on the premium end, so I've decided to bring out a budget knife, and a good one. This is the Petrified fish Beluga. Says it right there. This, as you can see, is a pretty chunky, large knife, and this particular version, as I miserably fail under the camera, is the Tonto, which is a very unique looking, and that's kind of why I bought this one. Though I have been tempted to buy the regular one too, because it's a good knife. It's a very good budget knife. It is a very budget knife, and it is a very good budget knife. If that's all you're interested in, yeah, like, subscribe. I've just given you the possibility to buy another budget knife, because you needed that, right? Yeah. Sorry. But what are we looking at here? We're looking at, in this case, this big, like, very weird, interesting looking Tonto that is surprisingly practical and useful. This knife is in K110. You can see it right there. I don't love seeing codes on knives, but this thing is so small and so out of the way. Yes, Petrified Fish does a good job of this. They do not muck up their blade with unnecessary branding. And yeah, this is no exception. I even don't mind seeing the code number for the knife on there because it's so darn small. And you can barely see it. But we're looking at K110, which is basically fancy D2. So this is not a corrosion-resistant knife. This is edge toughness, edge retention and toughness focused tool steel, not corrosion resistance. So keep the blade clean. As you can see, there's no, well, the blade, this knife actually came with that little mark right there. It's not corrosion as far as I can tell. It hasn't grown and hasn't done anything. So basic treatment of cleaning the knife, a little bit of oil, has kept this thing in pretty darn good condition. I've not had too much problem with D2, but it can corrode on you. We're looking at G10, in this case, handles. There are multiple options. They are contoured, yes, on a budget knife, which is pretty great to see. The clip is reversible and mounts from the rear, so super deep carry. I don't like seeing flats on the end of my clips, but this one still works surprisingly okay. I don't know why, but it does. We've got a liner lock running on, in this case, multi-row bearings. Yes, you heard that right, multi-row bearings. When I first got this thing, this was a drop-shut guillotine. I have used it and carried it, and I've had it for a while. I took it apart once, and I put it back together, and it's not been quite as drop-shut. It's more of a shake-shut. It's super smooth still, but I think I did that somehow. So it actually came with even better action than you're seeing here. This is a front flipper, and there is a fuller to reverse flick off of, but know that this is very tight, and you kind of have to go pretty low to get. The regular drop point, or whatever blade shape of this, actually the fuller is more accessible and easier to use. So if you want the satisfying reverse flick, the basic blade shape is probably your better bet. Just, that's important to note, just so I'm just getting an FYI of that. Let's jump into specs. Yes. The overall blade length is 3 5/8, so over 3.5. The handle length, not including that little tiny bit that the pocket clip sticks up, is about an 8 1/4. And 4 and just shy of 4 3/4. So 4.7-ish over on the blade, on the handle length. We will do a comparison, and you will see that this knife has quite a presence. It is not the longest knife in my collection, not even close. but few knives can match its presence while still being functional. This is a big, overbuilt style kind of looking knife, but it's very functional. And as you can see, it is bigger in blade length and handle length than the Conspirator, which is my full-size knife, and it dwarfs the Elementum. Also, as you can see, or as you can probably imagine just based on the look of the knife, it's tall. This is a tank. This is a big knife. It's also pretty thick. I mean, most of it's the contouring, but it's a big knife. It's basically a large knife without being a large knife, because it's not long enough or substantial enough, but everything else is saying, yeah, this is a big boy. Speaking of big, let's see how heavy this knife is. This knife is got full liners, steel liners. They have been milled out in there. Can you see? Yeah, good milling in there. Ooh, I like how they finished the G10 on the inside. It's like reflective. What is that? Wow. Okay, that's cool. Didn't even notice that. 6 ounces. Yeah. Yeah, it's a big knife. You got full, thick liners, big, thick pocket clip, big, heavy pocket clip, big, huge, tall blade. Let's see how thick this thing actually is. It is almost 600 thousandths thick, so over half an inch. The blade stock is 150 thousandths, 151 thousandths. I'm going to say it's probably supposed to be 150 thousandths. And yet, despite all that, behind the edge thickness, and this is always going to give me trouble, 16 thousandths? Yeah, I'm thinking that's almost 16 thousandths. Maybe a little, maybe 17. That is very reasonable. This is not an ultra thick knife. This is like right in that sweet spot of sort of just do everything. Up here, of course, on the front of the Tonto, it's probably going to be thicker, especially as you get up towards the tip, and no. 17-ish? 2. Okay. I mean, when you get up to the tip, yes, of course, but at the base of it, or right even halfway mark, it's still very similar to the same thickness as down here, which is quite good. Impressive. Hardware check. That's a T10. That is not what I'm looking for. T8 pivot. Unfortunately, everything else is T6 on this knife. I say it every single video, I don't like seeing T6. But, again, budget knife. These aren't the deepest T6 either. I really would like to see these being a T8 on this knife. Just, especially this knife, especially being as big as it is, there's no reason not to go with the T8s. So, Petrified fish, T8s, all around. That's the best option. Doesn't matter what it looks like, doesn't matter how it feels, just do it. Good lockup, as you can hear. So I think that's the end of our general specifications of this knife, so we'll jump into a quick analysis of each aspect and part of this knife. Deep carry clip. Good retention, not too tight. Maybe that's why it works so well, even though it has this flat. I don't like seeing the flat, but it works. I don't like seeing Beluga on the clip. I don't really like seeing anything but maybe a small sort of logo on a clip. That's a personal preference thing, but I think a lot of people kind of agree. You don't really need the name, especially the name of the knife on the knife. You don't need that. Ergos, while it is very neutral, it is also very tall. I mean, the average knife, let's see. The average knife is about how tall are we looking at for, and this is a reasonably tall blade on the Conspirator. An inch and 183 thousandths, so 1.2 inches about. Thickest point on this thing is 1.3. The handle is also 1.3, but the handle on the Conspirator is way down here at under 1 inch. It's a very tall blade and a very tall handle, and it feels that way. My hand, I have a slightly shorter fingers. Someone with longer fingers who can wrap them around better than me would probably be an even more comfortable grip. But this is still pretty comfortable. Like, this is, I feel locked in. I feel just the flat of this clip, which is, again, another reason why it needs to go away. The rest of the clip almost completely disappears, despite being a deep carry clip. Very good here. The ergos are good. The contouring is very comfortable. Nothing is sharp or hard. And you definitely have room to move around a bit on this knife. And still retain comfort. That's important. Some knives you can move around on, but they don't get comfortable. Yes, back here you feel the edge of the clip a little bit more. But up here, it almost completely disappears. It's very open and comfortable, despite this large of a knife, being this large of a knife. The Gorilla Grip for me is where it loses, because that is where my fingers need to be a little bit longer to be appreciative of it. But it works. I can do it. It's not uncomfortable. In fact, it's still pretty good. So, yeah, overall. And this is a lot of branding on a pivot. Like, not a lot of branding, but it's very distinctive branding, but I don't mind it, because it's abstract enough that it still looks good. So, Petrified Fish, I do like your branded pivots. Sometimes it bothers me. For example, you know what? I don't think I have one. No, I do have. No, I don't. No, I don't. Well, that's your example right there. I don't have one right near me. I don't love lots of branding on the pivots. At least not anything that's more obvious. Like, just the C is fine. The Wii logo on the pivot is fine. But when you start getting words and stuff, no thank you. This is good, though. And this sits a little proud. The liner lock has good access. Good strength. And it locks up pretty well. And this, like I said, is 2-3 years old now. Yeah, pretty good. The lock bar has not moved over a lot, which is a good sign. You have jimping back here, but it is pretty useless. It is very, very minor jimping. I would like to see that a tiniest bit sharper, harder angles on the jimping. If not just for that, but for the sake of the front flipper, despite the fact that the front flipper, for some reason, still works extremely well. Moving on to the blade, we have a plunge grind that is not quite to the edge termination, but it's pretty close. It's closer than I'd like to see, especially considering you have all this room to make it shorter. But this is a budget knife. I'm not going to knock it too hard for that, but it could be better. I'm assuming that's the designer's logo. Because it's a rhino and it doesn't belong anywhere on a petrified fish knife. Again, we have the fuller that can be used reasonably easily, but it's more accessible on the drop point version of this blade. But one thing that this blade does is, you think, because you have this blade shape, you're not going to be able to get to the tip. And yet you can. It's not that, you're a little higher up, but it's not that bad. But at the same time, because this secondary tip drops down and gets wider, it's super accessible and super usable. This thing is great for the utility cuts, despite having this blade shape. You have also a Tonto with a decent length in its initial edge angle. So you can use it for scraping with a little bit more room and freedom. It does offer some utility. It really does. This is actually a pretty good blade shape. And while I have not sharpened this knife, I have a fixed angle system. Put it in there. Put it at an angle to sharpen the Tonto. I don't think it will be a problem. Freehand, it probably would be even easier, maybe. I don't know. One thing I do like on this knife, and I've mentioned this in a few other videos, is that nub right there. It disappears, but it acts as a blade catch when you disengage this knife. So, especially when I first got this thing and it was like guillotine drop, you're not running the risk of coming into your finger in any way. This protects you. I've seen this more and more on some of the knives I've been reviewing that I've been going through in my own collection, and I like it. Yeah, technically, I guess you could say if it's too close, you could hit it when you're sharpening. But just be a little bit more careful, get a fixed angle system, something like that. I think the benefits outweigh the negatives. And in this case, that's great, with great access. And the lock bar is like, got a little cutout on it too, like a bowl. So it's super comfortable. This front flipper does not look like it would be good. It's not particularly sharp jimping. The jimping doesn't go over the top. You have this giant piece of the handle sticking kind of in its way, so you really, I mean, you can't go down here because you have handle in the way, so you have to go up here. It doesn't look like you would have enough purchase, and yet it works really well. I mean, let's see. I can even do that. And despite the thickness of this blade, because, I mean, yeah, see, it's a thick handle, while I screwed it up a little bit under the camera, I can even do that. This front flipper defies logic in the fact that it works when it shouldn't. This knife is also pretty darn centered. In fact, I think it's almost perfectly centered. It's also got a good-looking swedge up front. So, Petrified Fish. You done good. The Beluga is a great knife. I'm pretty sure it's been pretty popular. They've done a number of versions. You can get micarta versions. I personally like the blue micarta handles. I kind of wanted to get blue micartas on this, but at the time, I don't think the blue micarta for this blade shape was out. You can get G10 handles on this knife, both blade shapes at something like $42, $44, something, $42 for this exact knife. And it's great. I think the lowest they go is like the base one is $38.99. Yeah. That is wonderful. Even though some people don't like the D2, at that price, this is a wonderful, fantastic, big, surprisingly all-around usable, larger kind of knife. It's great. Micarta G10. You can also get carbon fiber at only $55 for carbon fiber on a budget knife. Yeah, I really like that. Though it might be on sale as of when I'm looking at this. If you hadn't noticed, I am looking at it off the screen screen here. There's also kind of like a G-Mascus kind of mix thing. That's like $48. The prices on these things are great. There is a mini version of this knife, which is still over 3 inches, or it is 3-inch blade. I have no experience with that, but it's an option. There's a fixed blade version in N690. That's $83. I don't know why that's that much. Or the base model of it is $83, $80, $80.99. I don't know why it's that much. It's probably the N690. N690, despite being kind of budgety to lower mid-tier, like bottom mid-tier, tends to be a little bit more expensive than you'd expect it to be. So fair enough. But there's a bunch of options with this knife. It's pretty readily available. And I should mention that this knife comes with, well, it did, mine came with, the ability to put in washers in pivot in place of these bearings. pre-sized washers. I have not changed it as I like my action. I don't necessarily need my front flipper to be a little bit stiff, but it is an option for those of you who want it. I feel like that works better on like thumb stud knives. So you got lots of options, and it's good. Like, subscribe, I'm done. See you in the next one. Thanks for watching.